And first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you for coming here to Iceland, to Fanfest. This is truly a festival of our fans, and a festival of Eve, because we, the staff members, are also very excited about Fanfest. Because we are very excited about Eve. So this is a celebration for us. And having you guys coming over, even though there was such an uncertainty a couple of weeks ago if Iceland really existed or not, I must say that you are showing that you are brave, as I would expect from any Eve player anyway. So it just confirms that you do not let any danger stop you from doing what you want to do. But thank you all for showing up. I am Eyjólfur Gudmundsson, known as Dr. AOG within Eve, and will be showing you some exciting stuff with regard to comparing the two worlds that Eve really and truly is, because we also have a server operating in China. But this is not only my work. There are plenty of people that are related to the work of anything that we do in terms of the QEN and other economic stuff. I really feel uncomfortable if I have to stand still the entire time. Well, we'll see how it goes. So we have several people on our team. Kjartan is an associate researcher. He is responsible for calculating the indexes that you see in the QENs. Binni is in the back there. He is our SQL master, just recently joined the team to help us speed up the process of QEN and other economic interesting stuff that will be coming. Phil Wang is in the back, community manager from China. He will be assisting us here in the Q&A afterwards. And John, are you here? John Turpin? No? Okay, he was here just earlier. So. He's also an avid Eve fan, been working as a GM for a couple of years and has now joined the research and statistics team. So this is just not the work of one man, this is a team of people that is needed in order to do this. It's this one, I should not step on. Okay? So today we have two worlds, but both share the same passion. And on today's menu, you are the first one to see this. I am really excited about this stuff, and it wasn't until a couple of weeks ago that we actually started to see this data, comparing it. And there are very few people within the company that have actually seen this. So you are the first one. Once we reviewed a couple of interesting items and talked about these two different servers, we will have questions and answers on that. After that, I'll talk to you about my dreams, which should really be our dreams, because what we want to have implemented by the end of next year. And finally, general questions and answers on that topic. So, without any further ado, I think it's just best that we dig into today's menu and enjoy the main course and the dessert later on. So, as you all know, Eve Online is a single universe. It's one server for the rest of the world, with about 200,000, about 250,000 people online subscribing to the database, to the Eve. And there is another world, which has been operating in China since 2006. We call it Serenity, while we call the Eve main server Tranquility. This one is completely localized with Chinese menus and so on, and some of you might have seen on the forums when Western players go and wander in the Eastern world. And the Chinese player can also wander the Western server, so to speak, or the world server. So there is flow between the two of people, but they are operated as independent units. The Chinese server is relatively smaller. It has over 20,000 subscribers at this point. But an interesting fact to note is that it's growing. Even though it's growing slowly, it's growing. And it's only one of two Western games that are still alive in China. The MMO market in China is basically local brands, and it's really, really big. But it's mostly local games that are there. So EVE and another game called World of Warcraft are still the only two Western, so to speak, MMOs that are still operating there. And we are quite proud of having the Chinese server in that tough market. Peak concurrent users on Serenity is about 42,000. It's about 5,775 or thereabout on Serenity. It's interesting that it's roughly the same amount of characters taken into account the size. So we have just under 500,000 characters on Tranquility and just about 50,000 on Serenity. So already there we see the first commonality, that even though these are two different servers in two different cultural areas, people tend to have about 2 characters per account. So that must be something with the game design. So technically, these two worlds are the same. They have the same game design. They have the same items. They look the same if you look beyond the language on the menus, but the world itself looks the same. But one has all people from all over the world, including China. The other one has mostly Chinese base. So the question is, are they really the same? If you put a specific environment into the hands of 2 different groups of people, will they come to the same conclusion, or will they do something completely different? There is a small note that I must make, that we have to remember that Serenity is younger and is pretty much in many ways like the younger brother or sister. That Chinese players, they look for stuff on TQ to understand better their own world. So there is not total independence between the player base. But it's, I thought, and I hope you will agree to what I have to say here later on, that it is really interesting to see how 2 worlds, technically the same, are developing. So, of course, we start with the skill points. On TQ, Tranquility, the average skill points between race range between 8 and 10 million. And you can see these columns that they are very colorful, and these are basically the major skill groups. On Singularity, the same numbers are between 6 and 8 million. And this, of course, makes perfect sense, because Singularity is 3 years younger than Tranquility. So you wouldn't really expect those players to have caught up, because the game is designed such that you train your skills all the time. But still, interesting to see that the structure in the races is about similar. With Kaltar and Galendi having more skill points than Amar or Minmatar. So to take a closer look at this, what we have to do is to look at similar people. Yeah, max skill points on TQ are 112 million. Are you here? Okay. And max skill points on Singularity is about 45 million. So we decided to look at this by groups. We decided to look at skill points on TQ between 2 and 50 million. And on Serenity, those that are at 2 million and above. And then you can see it becomes quite clear that they are similar in terms of total skill points, because they have been training for the same amount of time, basically. But an interesting pattern emerged. Spaceship Command is a higher share of the total points. And for Amar, Gunnery is a much higher part as well. So they've been training for the same time, they're in the same environment, but one of the races is training different skills. We look at this in terms of percentage here. So basically, to your left you have Tranquility, and to your right you have Serenity. These are both Amar races and same skill groups. So you notice already that the Spaceship Command is about 32% versus 25% for Tranquility. And the gunnery on Amar are 17%, but they are up to 29% on the Singularity server in China. And you also note that there are several other different categories that are different. Anything that has to do with electronics, engineering, industry, if you actually look further to your left at science and trade, you can notice that the Chinese server seems to be much more focused on battle, whereas the Tranquility server is focused more, or is including as well, trade and electronics, engineering, and more stuff that has to do with a different kind of gameplay. And this matches perfectly with the information that the people in China give us. The Chinese players, they like to do more mission running, they like to do more PvP and PvE. So there you can see the preferences already coming in the skill point training. It is not as obvious for the Kaldari, but still there is a considerable difference between Spaceship Command. But there, science has a higher percentage. So it's not quite obvious that this is the reason, but engineering is still higher on TQ, as trade and industry as well. So you can see industry at 5% here on 5% on TQ, and about 3% on Serenity. So, looking at these two races, we can see it is obvious that one server is more towards missiles, gunnery, and spaceship command. So if you look at them all, so this is kind of taking a step back. To your left, you have the 4 races on Tranquility, and to your right, you have the 4 races on Serenity. The big pink or light pinkish here is spaceship command, and the big blue here on the right is gunnery. And this shows you again this big difference in the sense that gunnery skills are in a higher percentage here than other skills compared between these two servers. So we know the characters are a little bit different. Then let's look at the ships. This is top 30, and even though it's difficult to get kind of any feeling for it in this table format, I decided to put it up here because it can use PowerPoint and show it a little bit more clearer. Of course, the frigates are as usually the top ships, simply because they are in great abundance and cheap and can be flown by anyone. But it's interesting to see that the Rifter is in 3rd place on TQ, but in the 15th on Serenity. And it's also interesting to see that the Badger is in 6th place on Tranquility, but it's in 11th place on Serenity. And that's the first industrial ship that shows up on the list. So an industrial ship is less popular on Serenity than they are on TQ. And even look at the mining barges. Oh, sorry, here's the Raven first. And that's an interesting as well. The Raven's in 26th place. And it's in the 16th on Serenity. And then the mining barges, the Retriever. It's 22nd on TQ, but it's in the 30th place on Serenity. And this really confirms what we saw in the skill. They are using more ships that are geared towards battle than industry or mining. Also note that this is a little bit different than we have presented the ships data before. These are all ships on the servers, even if they are in hangars, assembled or not assembled, and so on. It's not only ships that people are flying at a given point in time. And you can also see, of course, the difference in the size between two servers on this data. The Kestrel, there are about 350,000 in-game, and about 83,000 in-game in China. Just to remind us why we're here, flying around in space. So let's look at the frigates in a little bit more detail. And we start with the frigates on Serenity. And up until April this year, the environment actually provided the ships at a given price to the players. So it was pretty much the same situation as we had on TQ in 2003. You could buy stuff from the environment. When they opened up or withdrew the NPC orders, the price, of course, already jumped up, but after a while it has been declining towards the similar levels as before. And we've seen this on TQ happening as well. When we open up the market for something that was only NPC supplied, or also NPC supplied, there is a big pricing jump for a while, but it levels off afterwards. And I'm going to show you later on a theory that I'm working on in terms of MMO economics in general. And this is, of course, all JITA prices. And that's another thing that was quite interesting to see, that we all know that JITA just happened. It just turned out to be the place that the players really like to come together. It was not designed such by CCP. When the Chinese players started to play on their server, they, of course, asked themselves, where is the trade hub? And because JITA was a trade hub on TQ, or the main server, they just decided we'll make it JITA. And it was not done by vote or anything like that, it's just something that happened, because everybody thought that's the way it should be. So all prices that you see on these graphs here today are JITA prices, or forced prices, which is basically JITA. Now, looking at the same trend for frigates on Tranquility, you notice that it's similar. There are 3 ones that are in the higher percentage, and then one that is lower than the others. So if we look at them together, this is the Kestrel. On TQ, the prices have been declining throughout the year, and this is data from January 1st through August 10th. It's also been declining on Serenity, but it's still higher, which is probably related to the fact that you have a smaller market and fewer industrialists that are providing the services. Since we saw earlier that they'd rather train their character skills for PvP or battle rather than industry and manufacturing. Now, in one of my blogs from last year, I introduced a concept called co-integration that economists have been using increasingly over the past few years. So if you want to know what co-integration is, you can go to the website and read about it there. But in short, what it does is it tries to find a link between 2 time series that is not obvious. It takes the difference, the changes in these time series, and sees if those changes are stationary. It's basically asking, is there any long-term relationship between 2 time series? So I decided to test, is there co-integration among these 2? Are they moving, even though they're not the same price, are they moving at the same pace? When one increases, is the other one increasing? And also because I noticed that one was on a downward trend, the other one as well, even though it was just not as much. I thought, well, there must be some kind of connection there. And also because we knew that the Chinese player, they look at the TQ server, and look at what's going on there in order to understand their own world. I thought there must be some kind of relationship there, but I found none. Very low standard correlation and so on, and even with the advanced techniques, these markets seem to be completely independent of each other. So I said, well, maybe the Kestrel is just an example, something that's out of the usual, something extraordinary. So we looked at the battleships, and these are 4 battleships from both servers. Kind of cluttered to look at it like this, but it's an interesting trend if you look at it. Prices are always going down, and price of vessels within the same tier are moving together. If you look at this, for example, these are the Ravens and Megathrons on Serenity, on the Chinese server. So you can see these are vessels that are considered to be, well, I don't dare say equal, but with similar attributes. So they move together in a similar faction. But if you look at the TQ and Serenity prices, again, we see that the Raven Serenity prices are higher than on TQ, even though the difference has been getting smaller as the year goes by. Same with the Megathron. So what is going on here? We are seeing the prices declining. We are not seeing any integration between the markets as such. And sorry, there is no arbitrage opportunity here. You can't move stuff from TQ to Serenity and to sell it at a higher price. Beautiful idea, but doesn't work. So what is going on? We have 2 different communities participating in the same technical world, same environment. Is there something within the environment that is causing people to move in a certain direction on the market? And this is what I think is going on with a little bit of economics 101. The average cost is usually represented as an increasing function in quantity in economics. That means that your marginal cost or your extra cost is increasing as well. At any given time, there is demand for that particular product. And where the marginal cost meets marginal revenue, or on a perfectly competitive market, the price, you will have a market equilibrium. And you are producing at a profit because it's above average cost. So you are receiving the profit that you need to maintain your production and to be competitive on the financial market as well. So this is the standard economics 101 graph. If demand increases, it simply means that price and quantity increases. So we have a new equilibrium up here. But on TQ, Tranquility, and on Serenity, we have seen that as the population grows, the price of these Tech 1 items is always going down. And we talked about it in the QENs, that there has been a period of deflation. We contributed most of that deflation to the changes in the Tech 2 items, which was obvious due to the changes in the monopoly situation. But what's going on with the Tech 2 items? Shouldn't there be an increased demand and hence higher prices in the future? But it turns out when you start to look at the production process, that the average cost curve in any MMO is actually flat once you produced a few amounts of a particular item. You buy your blueprint, and that's sunk cost. You need to produce as many items as possible to distribute the cost of the blueprint among those, right? Now, what are your other costs? Well, it's the minerals. You just buy them at market prices. And then it's the cost of putting the stuff into production process, which is a fixed fee. So all the costs are fixed. So all that you focus on as a producer is to produce at the minimum cost. So it becomes a game of having the most efficient blueprint and gaining the material at the lowest price, and hence competing with the others. Therefore, we have a particular market equilibrium with quantity 1. If demand increases under these circumstances, in the very short run, prices increase, that's correct, within the minute, within the hours, maybe. But as we saw in the last QN, when the hulks were being attacked, what did the producers do? Within a week's time, they were producing 450 per day. They outpaced the destruction by, I think, 3 or 4-fold. So that simply means as soon as the price increases, there is a producer out there that's ready to jump in and put a blueprint into production. And therefore, quantity simply increases and prices lower again. And if you add to that the fact that the marginal cost can be lowering simply because you are training your skills, you are researching your blueprint, or you are simply not economically viable enough and you think that your minerals are for free, even if you mine them yourself. Which of course we all know is not the case, right? But it's quite obvious when you look at the data that some people do not take into account the opportunity cost of what they're doing. What do you do then? Well, you put out a buy order and you buy the stuff at a lower price than production cost. Amazingly enough, you will be sold stuff at that price, and in the same station you can sell it at a higher price. All you have to do is be a little bit patient. But the fact of the matter is that you can actually do this, and therefore prices would tend to be having a downward pressure. I think this is an important lesson for anyone thinking about designing an MMO. I've been looking at several MMOs, and it seems to be that this is the same story in all of them. Is that there is not assumed to be some kind of economies of scale in the production process. Production costs are fixed, and therefore you will always have a downward trend. Now, EVE is at the stage now that the players have advanced so much in terms of their production processes that they are actually fighting on margins of something like 1 to 5%, which is really showing it how really efficient it is. So what will happen in the future is going to be very interesting to watch. And in general, we can then say that prices are higher on Serenity, simply due to the fact that the markets are smaller and there are fewer producers. There is the same general trend, even though the prices are not linked, and it is because the game design is impacting how you react in that environment, relating to that Economics 101 that I just told you. So, let's look at some more interesting stuff from Serenity. Minerals, of course. This is titanium. From January 1st through August 10th. TQ has a lower price. Serenity has an average about 3.66. Does anyone remember that number? No. Last year we sat here and talked about 3.6 being the price cap on TQ. And also note how stable the titanium prices are on the Chinese server. But at the same time, prices have been moving relatively stable on TQ, even though they were increasing at that time, and they have been increasing over the past few weeks as well. And these prices are not co-integrated at all. There was obviously no connection between the two. And that simply says the markets are completely independent of each other. Citrine. Well, that looks kind of like they're moving together if you look at it from linear perspective. No, a little bit up here, and then going a little bit down, and then a little bit up again. But economics tells us that it is not co-integrated. Isogen? Are they moving together? No. These are independent as well. But as you can see that the prices are falling quite rapidly on the Chinese server. And then morphite. And here's a story for you. The TQ prices have been higher than the Serenity prices, which is vice versa with the low-end minerals. And you can also see that there's a drop here in the price, which simply means that there are missing values. So the market is definitely not as efficient on Serenity as it is on TQ. And then we had this crazy jump in the Morphet price in July and August. They've come down again since then. And we've been crunching through the data, and we are not quite sure what happened. So if anyone has inside information for me, talk to me afterwards. But we've been, as I say, looking at the data quite extensively, and there's no obvious reason for why this happened. Somebody could have been trying to play the market, but we'll have to see. So for the mineral, the high-end minerals in general are cheaper on Serenity, while the low-end minerals are more expensive. Now, from a game design perspective, that is surprising, because you would have thought that the prices would kind of be higher. But that relates again probably to the game style, meaning that there are fewer people that are actually out there mining and doing industry, and the size of the universe. If you are playing in the same universe, same environment, and there are approximately 250,000 on one of them, and approximately 25,000 on the other, well, those that have 25,000, they have more space. And it's easier to build on your own stuff. Tech 2. This is in vulnerability field, a Tech 2 item with a TQ price around 2 to 2.5 million. Relatively stable. We are over the period of decreasing prices on the Tech 2 market, so there seems to be a balance there. But a huge variability on the Serenity market. Again, no co-integration found. These are completely independent of each other. Ballistic control systems. Roughly about 1 million. Anyone who's thinking about moving stuff over there? Cruise missile launchers. Same story. Except for there in late July, which I found quite interesting, that the prices jumped on TQ and declined on Serenity. But this is simply to show us that there are individual events that happen on each server that impact the price, and in no relation to what is going on the other one. And the all, how should I put it, the necessary cap recharger too. Prices have stabilized on TQ, very volatile on Serenity. That caught me though by surprise. That was the only product of those that I looked at that showed kind of weak co-integration. It was weak enough so that I could reject it, but it looked like they were moving at a similar pace. I think it's just a warning that economics and econometrics doesn't always tell you the truth. But what is probably going there is that they are both fluctuating around a linear trend. See the Serenity prices, you can say that they're fluctuating around 2.5 million-ish, while the TQ prices are fluctuating around 1 million-ish per unit. So in that sense, I think that they're only picking up that they are both relatively stable within their own world. So I'm rejecting this one as well. That they are not truly, that they are not, they are independent of each other, truly not connected. But this one will be interesting to watch in the future. So with Tech 2, Serenity has higher Tech 2 prices in general. That doesn't surprise us. They are less advanced in the Tech 2 production. They have fewer skills and fewer people that can actually fly these ships. There's a downward trend on Serenity, but stable prices on TQ. One simple reason could be the implementation lag. Patches expansions are usually put on the Serenity server with a few months lag. So as an example, they still don't have factional warfare on the Chinese server. So that means that they have not had a chance to adjust as quickly to the changes in the Tech 2 production as an example. So it simply could be that it takes them a longer time to implement the same policies that we have had, the players, that is. So what will be the future for the Tech 2 prices? You saw the Economics 101 graph where we said that for anything that is relating to Tech 1 production, we would expect a downward trend in the price, even below cost of production, because, as we said earlier, not everybody realizes what their opportunity cost is. But what about Tech 2? Tech 2 is a much more complicated process, and you have to have advanced skills to do that. And you would assume that you were thinking in an advanced matter as well. And therefore, that should not apply to the Tech 2 production process. So, my opinion on that is that we will see Tech 2 prices increase in the future on TQ. They will decline on Serenity over time until they reach a certain bottom and then start increasing again. From a game design perspective, this is also very interesting because one is showing a similar trend as in real life, that is Tech 2. Once you reach the bottom and demand increases, there's a true shortage. So the price of the materials that are needed go up and so on. Has anyone heard of dysprosium moons? On Serenity, there is not the same shortage at this point. So I would expect those prices to be lower in the future. So that shows us how, even within the same environment with the same technology, that given different group sizes, given different play styles, the worlds can actually develop a little bit differently. And here's a Dominex that found a hive somewhere. So, from the mineral market perspective, it is efficient because it's providing the players with the stuff that they need without any input on neither on Serenity or TQ. So that functions in both worlds. Tech 1 is obviously a commodity market, and on TQ is probably the deflation driver these days. Tech 2, with increased competition, we have seen prices declining, but I would say that there is a question mark if it's going to be a deflation driver in the future. So we have decided to create another index for the QENs in the future, which will focus on Tech 2 prices only. And different game styles, they require different skill sets. So in the end, I would say they are the same with a twist. Even though you are putting this in two different cultural environments, you have the same principles come through. But they have a twist. The twist is the preference that one group has in a particular playstyle. Of course, for me as an economist, this is a beautiful concept because you can see now that people are reacting in the same manner no matter where they come from. So economics works then across cultures, works across countries, works for everyone in the world. Beautiful for me. I hope that you will agree on that. So that was what we had in terms of reviewing data for Serenity. Phil, if you would come down here. We are ready to take questions on Serenity or TQ, and then we will go on to my economy stream once we have finished these. So, questions on Serenity. State your name and the country you're from, just so we can all know each other. back in the days. No, we haven't looked at it in that way, and we have thought about it originally, doing the comparison from 2003 to 2005 for TQ, and from 2006 for Serenity. But the problem was that then these are not the same environments, not the same expansions. But an interesting question anyway.
Mike from the UK. The statistic that caught my eye, or maybe it's not a statistic, but anyway, was the learning. And when you had the comparison slides, Chinese were all at 12%, the two that we saw, and the two that we saw from the rest of the world were at 10%. Now, is that an anomaly given the time spent over the skills that's just reduced over time, or do they learn, learning skills given a higher priority by the Chinese players?
I'm not sure I can answer that. Phil, you think you have an opinion on that in terms of the Chinese players, if they're learning at a different pace, basically?
It certainly looks.
It could be. Actually, I haven't really looked at that part.
Yeah. I mean, we know that implants they have an impact and so on. So there's definitely a chance that they do that, but we simply don't have deep down enough into the data to be able to answer that. There and then up.
Lee from that UK. Actually, I've just got a contradiction. Would it be the fact that on the Chinese server, because they're running more missions and because they're younger, well, the younger base means that they're running all the missions because they've not done them. But on Tranquility, people have done the missions up to a point where they can do the missions in Tech 2 ships and not take very little damage, i.e. they don't lose the ships or no ships are lost anyway. Therefore, wouldn't it be the fact that because they've got more skills, they build Tech 2 stuff more easily?
You're talking about on TQ?
Yeah.
And in terms of the prices on TQ versus the prices on Serenity?
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a combination of those factors, yes. That our players on TQ are better trained as such. But at the same time, we have seen that the Chinese players are very mission-oriented, right, Phil?
But we've done all the missions. Missions to most people are not necessarily the primary thing they do.
Not according to my numbers. It's actually been an increasing profession rather than decreasing. So people are really running.
How many ships have been lost in missions for each server?
Oh, I don't have that number from the top of my head, but
Is it more Chinese or is it more?
yeah, we don't have it from the top of our heads. But that's an interesting point to look at. How many ships they're actually losing.
I will say that on Serenity in China, the players tend to rat in 0-0 more proportionally than Tranquility, just simply because it's less people to get into. Actually, there's still gate camps in 0-0 on Serenity, to strategic areas, but a lot of times what you see is, at least it was very common last year, was you see players would pay certain alliances what they call a passport fee, and they get to rat in there for a certain amount of time if they give them a certain amount of risk. There was also a what they call a freedom port on Serenity, where it's in 0-0 and it's patrolled by players against pirates, and then it's set up so that it allows new players to come in and rat in 0-0. There's like a safe haven to rat in 0-0. And there's I personally believe that it's more of there's more Chinese players like to rat in 0-0 versus doing missions than TQ.
Other questions? One up there and then there.
Carsten from Germany. I'm not sure about your interpretation of the skill point. Would it not just more mean that the characters on Tranquility are more purpose designed compared to the younger player base on Singularity, which tries to explore more, especially in the more skill points in Starship Command, which tries this ship, and that ship, and then Tranquility, okay, that's where Mimata, I need missiles, gunnery, I need electronics, mechanics to keep the ship alive. because what you put into the industrial world, like electronics, mechanics, and so, is very important to run a ship efficiently. So I'm not sure about the interpretation. I would just more think it's more purpose design or focus character, especially when you create now a new character, you know it will be a fight, it will be a mine and industries. So you don't spread your skill points in some areas so much around, but you focus, this is kind of ship, this is a kind of support skills, I need an electronic engineering, am I an armor tanker or a shield tanker? Is an electronic warfare character, so I need electronics. While in the younger days you try this, and that.
But remember that we are comparing skill points from 2 to 50 million on TQ, and you would expect them to be similar in age as anyone on Serenity in terms of gameplay. Because how many of you are actually having a character that is not being trained? Wouldn't you always have some kind of training ongoing?
Yes, once you create a new character, that is what.
Yeah, but then we're still talking about the same age of that character as such.
Yes, but a character is more focused. If I train an interceptor pilot, I make it speed. I train one class of Starship Command, frigate 5, interceptor 5, maybe electronics.
Yeah, no, it could be. It could be. At the same time, though, we were saying that the characters on Serenity are focused PvPs or PvEs. We had one question up there and then another one over there.
My question was answered more or less now.
Okay.
Paul US. My question is the 2 to 50 just too big of a spread? I know when I was skilling up my characters, I was deciding where I wanted to go, approximately 18 to 24 million skill points. 50 million is so high, even me at 2 years, I'm still not at that point. And as I get closer to that point of 50 million, I'm just randomly picking skills at some points because I've done with everything I need for my individual character. So he branches out to things that I wouldn't have ideally set him into. Is that a possible concern for later?
It could be, but I don't think it would affect the averages as such.
Martijn from the Netherlands. At the moment we see the amount of ores in the belts and high-sec decreasing steadily. Are we going towards a point where it will start to become a bottleneck where production is outpacing the respawn rate of ores and Empire? And compared to TQ, there's the abundance of availability of ore in high-sec. Do you see a difference in the way prices react?
Not based on that at this point. There is still so much stuff around in EVE that even though in certain places in high-sec that you might be seeing shortages, price in that area would increase a little bit and people would be starting moving stuff into that area. And the market on TQ is very efficient. So I think there's a long way until we start to see a real shortage in the basic minerals. But we are seeing it in some of the high-end minerals. 2 more questions on Serenity TQ comparison, and then we continue. 1 and then 2.
Scott from Canada. What's the difference between capture production between TQ and Serenity?
Per capita?
Capitals?
Capita production. I don't have the number yet. We're still just on the surface of digging through this data. So, but is there capital production at a high level on Serenity?
They have Titans.
You have Titans. Oh, and I can tell you something. On the list that I showed you there, the number of Titan was down on it. But you would have to kill me to get the number.
There's one less than it was yesterday.
Final question on TQ and Serenity.
Mike from the US. Can you talk about some of the demographics of the players in Serenity server versus Tranquility server? Are they younger, older? And has there been a push for changes in the way that the billing process works? Or, like, I don't know, microtransactions are much larger in the Asia market than the other territories. Has there been the same push there as well?
Well, for Serenity, the majority of our players are kind of similar to Tranquility. I mean, they're older than the average. They're closer to 30, like between 25 to as far as RMT is concerned, yeah, that does go on also in Serenity. Some of it is kind of sponsored by also by our partner as a marketing promotion at times. It's not RMT, it's more of a, buy your GTC, have a chance to win a battleship, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, it turns out that these are just guys like us who like to do battle in a space sci environment. Thank you, Phil. Now, dreaming. This is my big dream for the next year. We have already started the initial design steps of having an economic landing page. On that page, you should be able to read all papers that we have published on the economy of Eve. You will be able to access data to start doing your own analysis and then discuss it in this environment. I think this is would be very exciting because then we can continue what we are doing here on Fanfest online, and you guys can actually start to criticize me because now you will have the data as well. And that's what economics is all about. You have to have somebody else that can look and question what you're saying. The QENs will be on schedule by January 2008. We have the data for the next one already ready, and we'll be publishing that in November. And the third one for this year will be published in December, and then we will be back on schedule in January. So everything is looking good in that regard. We should be having a lot of good discussion on the economics of Eve all through 2009. So, before we let you go, any questions or answers on Eve, TQ, and the future development of the economics of Eve? One from the back.
Peter from the Netherlands. How do you think, of your hinting to Tech 3, how do you think it will impact on Tech 2 items?
Tech 3? No comment.
John Reeder from US. I was wondering what types of data. Is it just going to be indices, or is it going to be raw data?
That's one of the things that we are thinking about in the design process, and in the beginning it will definitely be market data. What will happen later on is we are unsure of. But any market transactions in terms of prices, high, low, average prices, and so on will probably be available. One over here and then here.
Doug from the Netherlands again. There's one game mechanic in the way the market works which has always been bothering me. And I'm wondering if that's actually influencing the way that pricing works. When you buy something from the market, even if you decide to go for a higher price, you're always forced to buy from the lowest price available there.
Mm-hmm.
Someone undercuts by 0.01 is the sale will always be his. Is that affecting the market in a negative way, and is that not forcing the price down even further?
It is definitely a mechanic that makes sure that you always buy at the lowest price, and therefore you wouldn't expect other than it does have an impact on the general price trend. But at the same time, it pushes up the efficiency of the market as such. The market becomes transparent. There are no jumps in price when you look at historical data, so you know the data is as healthy as possible. So it's a catch-22 thing. If you take it away, you get disturbance into the data that will send the wrong message to the general players. What I think will solve this is when and if well, let's not go there. Let's just walk. Let's just watch walking in stations later on today. One here and then one over there.
Discussing the prices of certain products, you always say that the production cost is fixed. Let's leveling out because of that. Are there plans to remove that
As with other things that which I have touched on since I arrived, I can't tell you there are plans, but those are my wishes. Sometimes my wishes come true, sometimes not. And I'll remind you of shuttles as an example. I had to push relatively hard to get these shuttles being player supplied only. That happened last March. We got rid of the price cap, which was good. And shuttles are available where you need them, right? Yeah, 10 times the price, but that's because that's the right price. we don't want any government subsidies to give you the shuttles at some low price. No. Doesn't work. There was one more up there, yeah?
Yeah, just for Denmark. It's always annoyed me that not everything the game is produced, like blueprint originals and skill books, so forth. Do you think if they were producible, that this would have a major impact on the market? I mean, everything.
Yeah, it would definitely have an impact on the market, and it would depend on the game mechanics. But there is a reason for this. And the reason for this is that in any MMO environment, and they learned this in Ultima Online a long time ago, you need to have sinks of ISK. So you have money flowing into the system through missions and stuff like that, and you need to have money flowing out again. Otherwise, it just simply accumulates, and you will have hyperinflation, or you will have a situation where the money just isn't worth anything, and you will all start trading in feathers or something.
But doesn't that just depend on the outflow of the items? I mean, if they're lost, I mean, the skill book is lost when you try to learn.
No, you actually need to have that transaction, that cash flowing out, because you can always use the cash to trade. So it doesn't really matter if it's the skill book or the blueprints or whatever structure you use, or if you use taxes. We could implement the income tax instead. In order to gain money from the system. And we have some taxes in there that we can increase if we need to increase the outflow. But so far, using the item sales has been the best way of draining the system of ISK. 2 more questions and then we're out. One over there and one up there.
Regarding the prices of blueprints, they're currently set at 10 times the ship and module value, just thereabouts. But for components, and especially very newsworthy item, probably capital ship components, they are about 100 times. And therefore that's beyond many organizations' reach. Is there any consideration given on modifying those prices?
Not particularly, no. It's always a game balance issue as such, and the capital pricing should be an industry that's difficult to get into. So.
But the capital ship prices depends on the materials you require to build them with. You also need blueprints, which of course in normal life once you know it, it's fine, but here you have either a copy or an original. And the prices are a tad high, so you're limiting capital ship production to large organizations or alliances, which I find
we're heading into game balance, and we're heading into the fact, what exactly do you want to achieve? And capital ship production was intended to be something where you needed people to come together to produce. So my answer to that question is that I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. One from the back.
Has your study on virtual worlds economies changed your views on real life economies?
Deep one. No, it hasn't changed my views, but it has made me even a stronger, quote and unquote, believer in that economics describe human behavior. Some say that I was born an economist for some reason. I just studied to confirm that I actually wanted to be an economist, but it seems to me that people take their preferences and their actions into a game world, and when you have a much clearer world, not that noise that you see in real life, you actually see how well this theory is describing the behavior. So it reaffirms what I had before, is that you could actually you could actually use this theory to describe events in real life. And it's just like what's happening these days. People are saying capitalism is dead, and markets have shown that everything is going down, so we have to have a new system. The fact of the matter is that capitalism is working exactly as intended. People were making the wrong decisions, and therefore the market crashes. It's just obvious. So for me, that's just, once again, a confirmation that the system actually works, because it's based in the preferences and the assumption and choices that we can make. But a very good question. Any final question? One there in the corner.
I'm just wondering if you are ever going to implement something with loyalty points, where you can hand in, say, 10 for one of another faction, or maybe go the same way with research points.
That would be a question to ask the devs, the devs, the game designers and content people on one of the panels. I wouldn't be able to answer that one. Okay, now thank you all for coming. I mean, it's awesome to have you here at 10 a.m. on Friday morning to come and listen to economics. I love it. And you do not want to miss out the 1 o'clock presentation.